A few years ago, a woman sat across from me in my office. Her name was Margaret. She was 72, and she was trying very hard not to cry. She told me she'd spent 3 days preparing for a visit to her son's house in another state. She baked his favorite banana bread. She picked out small gifts for the grandchildren. Nothing expensive, just thoughtful. She drove 4 hours by herself because she didn't want to be a burden by asking someone to take her. And then she told me what happened when she got there. Her son opened the door, looked at his watch, and said, "Oh, I thought you were coming tomorrow." She stayed for 3 days. During those 3 days, she ate most of her meals alone. Her grandchildren barely looked up from their tablets. And on the last night, she heard her daughter-in-law say to her son, not quietly enough, "Thank God she's leaving tomorrow." Margaret drove home in silence. No radio, no phone calls. Just 4 hours of asking herself the same question over and over: what did I do wrong? I've been a psychologist for over 40 years. I've worked with hundreds of elderly patients, and I can tell you, Margaret didn't do anything wrong. But there were signs. Signs she didn't want to see. Signs that, if she had recognized earlier, could have saved her a tremendous amount of pain. Today I'm going to share 5 of those signs with you. 5 things your adult child might do during your visit that tell you, clearly and unmistakably, that it's time to leave early. Now I want to be very clear about something before we go any further. This video is not about hating your children. It's not about cutting them off. It's not about revenge or bitterness. This is about one thing and one thing only: protecting your dignity, protecting your emotional health, and honestly, protecting the relationship itself. Because sometimes the best thing you can do for a relationship is to walk away from a bad moment before it becomes a permanent wound. So, let's talk about it. Here's what I've learned after 4 decades of sitting with people in their 60s, 70s, and 80s. The number one source of emotional pain in later life is not money. It's not health. It's not even the fear of dying. It's the relationship with their adult children. Study after study confirms this. Research published in journals of gerontology consistently shows that strained relationships with adult children are among the most significant predictors of depression, anxiety, and even physical decline in older adults. Your blood pressure doesn't spike because of a stranger's words. It spikes because the person who hurt you is someone you would die for. And yet, and this is what breaks my heart, so many of my patients refuse to acknowledge the pain. They minimize it. They explain it away. They say things like, "Oh, he's just stressed with work," or "She doesn't mean it that way," or the most common one of all, "I don't want to cause problems." Let me tell you something. You are not causing problems by having feelings. You are not being dramatic by expecting basic respect. And you are certainly not being selfish by deciding that your emotional well-being matters. Leaving early is not abandonment. Let me say that again. Leaving early is not abandonment. It is in many cases the most loving thing you can do for yourself and for the relationship. Because if you stay and absorb the pain in silence, resentment builds. And resentment is the slow poison that kills families. So let's look at the 5 signs. And I want you to be honest with yourself as you listen. Sign number 1. They talk to you like you're a burden, not a guest. You arrive at their door. You're smiling. You're excited. Maybe a little nervous because it's been a while. And the first thing you hear is something like, "Mom, this really isn't a great week," or "Dad, you know how crazy things are right now," or just a sigh. A long, heavy sigh as they open the door. Now, no one is going to say to you, "You are a burden." They won't use that word, but you'll feel it. You'll feel it in the way they check their phone while you're talking. You'll feel it in the way they mention 3 or 4 times how busy they are. You'll feel it in the subtle implication that your visit is an inconvenience they're enduring, not a joy they're experiencing. In psychology, we call this emotional dismissal. It's when someone communicates, through words or behavior, that your presence does not matter, that you are taking up space that wasn't meant for you. And here's what happens inside you when this goes on. You start shrinking. You start apologizing for existing. You say things like, "Oh, I can just stay in my room," or "Don't worry about me, I'll figure it out." You become a guest in a house where you should be family. So I want you to ask yourself a very simple question. And be honest. Do you feel like you need to shrink yourself just to exist in their home? Do you feel like you need to make yourself smaller, quieter, less visible, just to keep the peace? If the answer is yes, that's your signal. A visit where you have to apologize for being present is not a visit. It's an endurance test. And you, my friend, have endured enough in this life. Sign number 2. They hand you a screen and disappear. This one is sneaky because it looks like hospitality. Your child sets you up in the living room. Nice couch. Big television. Maybe a cup of tea. They say, "Make yourself comfortable, there's plenty to watch." And then they vanish. For hours. Maybe they're in the home office. Maybe they're out running errands. Maybe they're in the backyard with their spouse, laughing about something you'll never be part of. But the result is the same. You're sitting alone in a room, watching a screen, in a house full of people. Now, I've had patients tell me, "But they were being nice. They gave me the best seat. They made sure I had everything I needed." And I always ask the same question. Did they give you what you actually came for? Because you didn't drive hundreds of miles for a comfortable couch. You didn't pack a suitcase to watch Netflix in a different zip code. You came for connection. You came to sit across from your child and hear about their life. You came to watch your grandchild draw a picture and have them hold it up and say, "Look what I made, Grandma." You came for 10 minutes of real conversation, the kind where someone looks into your eyes and is actually glad you're there. This is what I call passive neglect. There's no cruelty in it. No one raises their voice. No one says anything mean. But the absence of connection is its own kind of wound. Comfort is not connection. A warm blanket and a streaming subscription cannot replace the feeling of being wanted. I want you to notice something the next time this happens. Notice how your body feels. Not your mind. Your body. Because your mind will make excuses. Your mind will say, "They're busy, it's fine." But your body will tell you the truth. The heaviness in your chest. The restlessness. The urge to call a friend, anyone, just to hear a voice that sounds happy to talk to you. Trust your body. It doesn't lie. Sign number 3. They correct, criticize, or belittle you in front of others. This is the one that, in 40 years of practice, still makes my blood pressure rise. You're at dinner. Maybe it's a family gathering, or maybe your child's friends are over. You start telling a story, a good story, one you enjoy telling, and halfway through, your child interrupts. "Mom, that's not how it happened." Or they roll their eyes. Or they say to their spouse with a little laugh, "Here we go again." Or maybe it's more direct. You offer an opinion and they say, "Dad, please don't," as if you're a child reaching for something on a high shelf. You ask a question and they answer with that tone. You know the tone. The one that says, "How do you not know this?" In psychology, we have a word for this. It's called infantilization. It's when an adult treats an older person like a child, correcting them, speaking for them, making decisions for them, dismissing their thoughts as irrelevant or outdated. And it happens in public, which makes it worse. Because it's not just about the words. It's about the message being sent to everyone in the room. This person's voice doesn't matter. I've had patients describe this feeling so precisely, it haunts me. One man, 78 years old, retired engineer, built bridges his whole life, told me, "I felt like I was 5 years old again, but this time, my own son was the one making me feel stupid." Let me tell you something that I believe with everything I have. You can lose your speed. You can lose your memory for small things. You can lose your hair, your hearing, your ability to open a jar without help. But you never, never lose your right to be spoken to with respect. If your child cannot offer you basic dignity in front of others, that is not a communication problem. That is a respect problem. and you do not have to sit there and absorb it. But here's the next sign, and honestly, this is the one that breaks my heart every single time. Sign number 4. Your grandchildren don't know you, and no one seems to care. You walk in the door, and your grandchild, this little person who shares your blood, your history, your family name, looks at you like you're a stranger. Maybe they hide behind their parents' leg. Maybe they call you by the wrong name. Maybe they say nothing at all and go back to their room. And the worst part, your child doesn't bridge the gap. They don't kneel down and say, "Sweetie, this is Grandma. Remember, I told you she was coming?" They don't encourage connection. They don't show photos of you. They don't tell stories about you. It's as if you're a distant acquaintance who happens to share a last name. Now, I want to be fair here. Sometimes distance is a real factor. If you live far away and visits are rare, young children may genuinely not remember you. That's natural. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about zero effort. I'm talking about a pattern where your child has made no attempt, none, to build your presence in your grandchild's life. No video calls. No grandpa sent you this. No framed photos on the shelf. Nothing. And here's what hurts the most about this one. It's not really about the grandchild. Children are innocent. They respond to what they're taught. What hurts is the realization that your own child does not see your relationship with your grandchild as something worth building. That's the knife. Not the child's confusion. The parent's indifference. I've watched patients try to process this, and it's one of the hardest things I've ever witnessed. Because you can handle your child being cold to you. You've survived hard things before. But watching the next generation not even know who you are, that reaches a place inside you that nothing else can touch. If you see this happening, it's a sign. Not necessarily that your child is cruel, but that something in the relationship needs to be addressed. And staying longer in a house where you're invisible is not the way to address it. Sign number 5. You leave feeling worse than when you arrived. This is the sign that encompasses all the others. And it's the one your body will tell you about whether your mind wants to listen or not. You drove there excited. Maybe anxious, but excited. You had hope. You thought, maybe this time will be different. Maybe this time we'll finally have that nice afternoon together. And now you're driving home. And you feel, what? Tired. Yes. But it's more than tired. It's hollow. It's a sadness that sits in your chest like a stone. You replay conversations in your head. You wonder what you could have said differently. You wonder if you're too sensitive. You wonder if it's your fault. You get home and the house feels emptier than before you left. You don't sleep well that night. Maybe not the next night either. You don't eat as much. You don't feel like calling your friends. You don't feel like doing much of anything. This is what I call an emotional hangover. And it's your body's clearest signal that the visit was harmful to your well-being. I want to give you a very simple tool. Before your next visit, sit quietly for a moment and rate your mood on a scale from 1 to 10. Write it down. And when you get home, do the same thing. Rate your mood again. Write it down. If the number goes down, pay attention. If it goes down significantly, that's not a bad day. That's a pattern. And patterns deserve respect. A visit to your child's home should fill your cup. It should leave you warmer, lighter, more connected to the people you love. If it's doing the opposite, if it's draining you, dimming you, making you question your own worth, then something needs to change. And that change might start with 3 very difficult, very brave words. I'm leaving early. I know what some of you are thinking. If I leave early, they'll be upset. They'll think I'm being dramatic. They'll say I'm playing the victim. Maybe. Maybe they will. But let me tell you what leaving early is not. It's not slamming the door. It's not a guilt trip. It's not a punishment. It's not a weapon. Leaving early is a quiet, dignified act of self-preservation. It sounds like this. I love you. I've enjoyed being here. But I think it's best if I head home a little earlier than planned. I could use some rest. That's it. No accusations. No long speeches. No list of grievances. Just a calm, clear, loving exit. And if they ask why, you can say, I just need to take care of myself right now. You don't owe anyone a 5-paragraph essay about your feelings. You are allowed to leave a place that hurts you. You have always been allowed. You just forgot. I want to teach you a phrase that I've taught hundreds of my patients, and many of them tell me it changed their lives. Here it is. I love you too much to stay, and let this visit become something we both regret. Write that down. Say it out loud in your car before you walk in the door. Let it become your anchor. Because here's the truth that most people never consider. Leaving early can actually save the relationship. When you stay and absorb mistreatment, resentment builds silently on both sides. You resent them for how they treat you. They resent you for being there, if we're being honest. And that resentment hardens into distance that can never be crossed. But when you leave with grace, something interesting often happens. Your absence speaks louder than your presence ever could. It says, I value myself. I value this relationship. And I refuse to let either one be damaged. That's not weakness. That, my friend, is the kind of strength that comes from a lifetime of living. I want to come back to Margaret, the woman I told you about at the beginning. After our sessions together, Margaret made a decision. The next time she visited her son, she shortened the trip. She stayed 2 nights instead of 5. She brought the banana bread, but she didn't bring the desperate need to be loved. She brought herself, calm, warm, and for the first time in years, prepared to leave if she needed to. And something unexpected happened. When she told her son she was leaving a day early, there was a pause. And then he said, Already? I thought we'd have more time. It wasn't a Hollywood ending. He didn't cry. He didn't apologize for years of emotional distance. But that one sentence, I thought we'd have more time, told Margaret something she hadn't heard in a long time. That her presence mattered. That her absence would be felt. She told me later, with tears in her eyes. For the first time, I think he realized I won't always be there. And you know what? She was right. You won't always be there. None of us will. And that's exactly why every visit matters. Every conversation counts. Every moment of disrespect is a moment you don't get back. You spent your whole life taking care of them. You stayed up with them when they were sick. You worked extra shifts so they could have what they needed. You put their dreams ahead of your own more times than you can count. Now it's time to take care of the one person you've been neglecting all along. You. You deserve visits that feel like coming home, not like walking into a courtroom. You deserve a chair at the table, not a seat in front of a screen. You deserve to be spoken to like the wise, experienced, valuable human being that you are. And if any visit, with anyone, even your own child, cannot offer you that, then you have every right and every reason to leave early. Not in anger, in love, in strength. In the quiet confidence of someone who finally knows their own worth. Thank you for watching. If this video spoke to you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Sometimes the people who need these words the most are the ones who would never search for them on their own. And if you haven't already, subscribe to Strong Elderly Life. We're building something here, a community of people who believe that growing older doesn't mean growing smaller. I'll see you in the next video. Until then, take care of yourself. You've earned it.